everyone, welcome to another what I would have done Thursday, and today for this first ever 2015 year video, I'm going to be discussing a film that came out fairly recently and reflects onto the day before today, actually, and as you can see by the title, that is New Year's Eve. Now, I think it's only appropriate to discuss this film in particular, considering the fact that New Year's Eve just passed, and I think this film addresses a lot of things that actually sort of are kind of a part of the kind of New Year's celebration and kind of culture, but at the same time, I think reflects sort of a lot of negative attributes, and this is not just from a New Year's Eve film. I'm speaking as a film in general as well. So this video is intended to sort of discuss what I would have done had I been in the director's chair directing this film, because I felt that there were a lot of problems within this film. This film has received tons of negative criticism. I believe it has actually a 7% on Rotten Tomatoes, if I'm not mistaken. So it really got canned, this movie. This was actually sort of a follow-up movie to Valentine's Day, and the similarity between the two is that it suffers, again, they do suffer similar problems, but this one seems to be the one that put the nail in the coffin for these kinds of jam-packing tons of celebrity rom-com films. And this one actually didn't turn out to be all that successful either at the box office, so I think people sort of, from the Valentine's Day film, sort of got the picture and thought, yeah, we don't really need another film that does basically what Valentine's Day did. So without further ado, let me discuss a little bit of what this film has to offer and kind of what I think could have been changed to make it better. Now, as you might know, if you have a ton of celebrities, there's going to be a ton of storylines to go with those celebrities, because everybody wants their little 20 minutes of fame, maybe, or 30-minute section of fame throughout a film. So the storylines within this film usually revolve around similar things, or have certain conflicts that are kind of don't amount to much stakes, and things usually don't tie in together well as a result, because if you have too many storylines going within your film, it's very hard for the audience to get invested in all of them, and therefore any, because you're trying to divide everything up and at the same time try to make it connect, and that's very difficult to do within a short amount of time. So the characters are not really given a whole lot of breathing room, I feel, and this really makes it difficult for this kind of a story setup that it tries to present to work, especially when you want it to revolve around this kind of a holiday. So a way that they could have combated, I think, the excessive amount of storylines would have been to cut the celebrity appearances. Choose a couple of big name celebrities / actors and actresses and say, okay, you're going to be in this film. Don't choose 50 billion. You don't need to do that. You can just choose a select few and have us focus on these select few people, and not on trying to cram in as many faces as you can get on a poster, which clearly this film's marketing campaign was trying to do, because you see literally all the celebrities that are within the film in the one shot of the poster, similar to Valentine's Day, except in Valentine's Day they have a heart in a heart-shaped picture. So you sort of get a sense of what's going on when you have less people to focus on, and you get more invested in those people. It's better to have fewer people and execute the storylines fairly well, than having a ton of people and not being able to gel them out properly, and as a result, we don't get a good product. So not only does the issue of the storylines affect the characters and the way they're presented to the audience, but their interactions with each other. These characters are so thinly, loosely tied together. Like, I am not kidding you. They are not, they don't feel like actual characters that have relationships together. Because most of the storylines don't revolve around the characters really being together as much as we see them together for a couple of minutes, and then we move on to another storyline, and this other storyline doesn't have anything really to do with the other storyline that the character is tied to. So there's a lot of confusion that ends up happening because we don't know what really connects people together, because we don't feel like that there's any relationships within the film. And it does end up feeling fairly superficial and not as interesting or engaging, because everything is sort of loosely tied together, and when there are character relationships, there's a lot of really cliche kinds of ideas thrown in, and really not necessarily, I think, identifiable characters within these kinds of cookie cutter relationship scenarios that we get. So that needed to be on the top of this movie's priority list, especially when you want to make it revolve around a holiday that is supposed to be sort of around togetherness and celebration and, you know, being sort of maybe a little bit of a more party film. You know, you needed to have those relationships work and be fun, but this film lacks that. So another huge problem that this film suffers is commercialism. Big commercialism problems. Partially that has to do with the film's location, which is in Times Square for the most part. All the storylines revolve around Times Square. And I know Times Square is a very big place for people to celebrate New Year's. And I understand that, you know, it's just one of those things that can result in, you know, making it feel like a party, because, you know, in Times Square, you know, there's a lot of lights, there's a lot of, you know, spectacle surrounding it, and it's maybe not as exciting as somebody putting a block of cheese onto the ground once New Year's comes. And I'm not kidding you, one particular state in one particular city did that this year. Not kidding. So I understand the appeal of putting all the characters in Times Square. The problem with that is Times Square is a fairly commercial area. There's a lot of advertising, there's a lot of, you know, kind of ridiculousness and over-the-topness that comes with celebrating New Year's in Times Square. And I'm not saying that just the location alone makes it feel commercialized, but just the way the film inserts itself within Times Square brings that to kind of the forefront, because not only are the character relationships fairly cookie cutter, but you also get a lot of things that really shouldn't be made a big deal of, and shouldn't be really overemphasized or even given a plot. And it doesn't really give the film any weight. For example, Hilary Swank's character, she's supposed to be in charge of making sure that the ball goes down. and they make a big deal of how stressful the job is for her, and how it's so complicated, and this is so important to have this ball drop right, and blah blah blah, and when really ultimately, as long as it drops, people really don't care. If there's a little bit of a light problem, you can't really change that, and it's not like it would be her fault anyway, because literally all they show her really doing is flipping the switch, literally. So yeah, it doesn't really feel like um a identifiable, at least, plot line. And then she's given probably the most heavy plot line on top of that by having her dad passing away during this time. So you put in this plot line and then have her have this meaningless plot line. It's just, and I think again it just ties into like how superficial this film feels. Like, it feels very commercial. It feels like a bunch of A-list Hollywood rich people coming together and saying, hey, let's make a movie. Especially with that one scene where Sarah Jessica Parker comes out and she's wearing like something super super fancy and looks like really expensive, and you go, okay, this isn't Sex and the City. Please tone it down. Like, come on. I mean, the film just felt like uh, just a showcasing of how ridiculous our kind of commercialism aspect of this holiday has become. Again, they showcase that too within Valentine's Day, and they do it here, because I mean, there's just a lot of things within this film that do feel kind of just like, what's the point of having this? And a lot of it has to do with just doing just pointless and showcasing really random things, like, ooh, look at how cool Sarah Jessica Parker looks. Ooh, look at how Michelle Pfeiffer, she's going and she's doing all these little things before New Year's. It's just so, like, there's just no story here. So yeah, and I think that's partially due to the kind of commercialist attitude it has, where it's like, ooh, go out and buy stuff. Go out and do pointless and random things, because it's New Year's and you need to buy and you need to do stuff and you need to wear really over the top fancy clothes, and we need to make a big deal about the ball dropping, and it's just all of this pointless, meaningless things that could have been used to make a story. So that's definitely something that they needed to push to the side. Again, also there's a lot of storylines that are fairly similar. There's a lot of different romances going on. There's a baby plot. Yes, there is a baby plot within this film. There is a mom-daughter plot and a old woman and young boy plot. Yes. Very strange too. So there's a lot of the storylines that do kind of form in a similar fashion, like it's just random people meeting each other and suddenly starting to feel something. I mean, I understand they're trying to bring out that kind of magic that we would come to, I guess, really expect from such a holiday like this, but there needed to be more of a emphasis on making it feel genuine and not artificial. And I felt like a lot of these storylines were based on being fairly artificial. And also, there needed to be an understanding of, again, cramming in those storylines and maybe focusing only on certain people. I think there would have been multiple routes into which ultimately they could have executed this product with. I'm not saying that they should have X'd one actor and kept one actor. I mean, I think had they kept whoever and given them a good story to go with, I think we could have gotten something okay. But I'll go with you sort of the plot line stories that are all going on within this film. And in doing so, I'll kind of give you a sense of how kind of, bizarre and kind of almost unidentifiable they are. So let's start off right off the gate between Zac Efron and Michelle Pfeiffer. And I believe Michelle Pfeiffer's probably almost twice Zac Efron's age, but correct me if I'm wrong. But apparently they developed some kind of relationship. It's very bizarre, because she just meets up with him and is like, hey, I'll give you these tickets or whatever, and you take me to do all of these things that I wanted to do before New Year's. That's their storyline in this movie. Now, this would have worked on, I think, a romantic level had they been roughly the same age, which they are not. And they're clearly from different generations, too, because Michelle Pfeiffer is obviously a lot more mature of an actress as well as of a character than Zac Efron's character is. And so Zac Efron kind of screws it up, but ultimately makes up for it by giving her a kiss on New Year's, which I find to be very creepy because, again, she's almost twice his age. And you don't really feel that there's any romantic, connection that they have. It's just almost this very weird, bizarre relationship that ends up happening, I mean, you don't even feel like it's even a mom-son relationship either. It's just weird. It's kind of bizarre, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I almost would say that it would have been best had they scrapped this storyline because I just find it just really weird and unusual. And I mean, I think they could have had something similar to, and I think this would actually have been better. So I'm gonna, I guess, propose multiple scenarios of what they could have done with this film by choosing these kinds of storylines and kind of going into them. So with Zac Efron and Michelle Pfeiffer, what they could have done instead, if they wanted to focus on two people meeting up and maybe falling in love on New Year's, what they could have done is they could have had either Zac Efron meet up with a girl that is around his age, which could have worked, or have Michelle Pfeiffer meet up with a man that is roughly her age, and they kind of go on this, this kind of adventure, and in doing so end up developing feelings for one another. Now, this could have been done in a bigger span of time and didn't have to necessarily tie into New Year's. See, this film thinks that it needs to shove in New Year's, and that makes it a unique storyline when really it doesn't. It doesn't have to revolve around New Year's, but it can take place at New Year's. So my idea for this storyline would be just pure simple. Let's say he has a motivation for doing this. Like, maybe he's definitely not motivated to, take Michelle Pfeiffer onto these various excursions, or Zac Efron is not motivated to take whatever girl he meets onto these various excursions that she has. But she brings in some motivation. Either the girl that Zac Efron meets or Michelle Pfeiffer brings a motivation to the man that makes him want to go with her on these various excursions. Now, maybe it could be the fact that, she And again, they have a thing within the story that she quits her job. Maybe would have made more sense if she got fired or something bad happened within her life and she wants to gain a sense of maybe fulfillment. Maybe a relative passed away and he wants that person wanted her to do all of these amazing things, and maybe leaves her something to do those things, but maybe since she lost her job, she doesn't really have all the resources to do the things, so she gets somebody to help her out, and kind of help her go on these excursions or something to that effect. It could have been something on those lines, and then ultimately up until New Year's Eve, is you could have maybe put in some kind of conflict, and then had sort of a resolution take place on New Year's Eve. Now that would have worked fine, and that would have just been the film. And you could maybe have, other characters, but they're just there as supporting characters and not as a focus. So yeah, I think that could have probably worked a little bit more into the movie's favor. The next storyline is a little less strange than the previous one, but at the same time could have been executed a whole lot better. And that involves Ashton Kutcher and that one girl from Glee. I'm so sorry, I don't remember her name. I believe her first name is Michelle, but I don't remember her last name. But they get stuck on an elevator, and then they bond. That's pretty much their whole storyline. That's it. That's all this movie's got to offer. So this definitely didn't need to take place in an elevator. I almost want to say this is actually the one storyline that I think should have been scrapped completely, because it doesn't offer anything to the table. Ashton Kutcher's reasoning for being a Scrooge on New Year's is kind of just not as well explained, and even then it's just there as an explanation, and you really don't see them really bond all that much, because again, we got tons of other storylines, so I almost want to say this one could have been scrapped, because there's not a whole lot going on. With Zac Efron and Michelle Pfeiffer's storyline, you could have had actually a lot more going on, and maybe a lot more interesting things going on. It could have been like a travel adventure or something like that. I mean, you could have had some kind of storyline that would make two people ultimately go on an adventure and fall in love. That's actually a lot more interesting than two people falling in love on an elevator. And doesn't really, you can't really bond by just being on an elevator, you need to kind of go out in the world and do stuff. So yeah, being stuck on an elevator is just doesn't lead to anything. So I think that storyline, I don't know what I would have done with that storyline actually, because I think that should have just been completely scrapped. Now there's another storyline, again, piling on the storylines here, between Sarah Jessica Parker's character and that guy from that Vegas TV show. I don't remember his name, I'm sorry. And her daughter. Now, you could say that there's two storylines that Jessica Parker has, the one with her and the Vegas TV guy, which doesn't lead to anything. This relationship, they have this really weird, bizarre, they meet up like a year ago or something, and then they say, oh, if you still have feelings, meet me at New Year's. who in their right mind would do that? I mean, that's just insane. Like, why would you wait for a year to meet up with somebody again? That makes no sense whatsoever. So that storyline could have been scrapped completely. That storyline didn't need to be in there. That's ridiculous. And again, could have led to something that was a little bit more interesting, like a romance adventure film. Okay. So, and then also we have Sarah Jessica Parker and her daughter, who, again, it's the typical cliche girl is rebellious and wants to do what she wants, and mommy is like, no, sweetie, no, definitely not. And obviously the mom does know better than the little girl, but the little girl ends up getting what she wants at the end, which is stupid. So yes, I don't think that this one could lend itself to a film, but it could have been an interesting side story that you could have. Maybe one of the characters is somehow related to either Michelle Pfeiffer or Zac Efron, and they somehow come into the story and they have some conflicts. And that ends up tying in with the storyline about the two lovers or something like that. You know, they didn't have to completely tie together, but at the same time, I think lending a whole movie about, just a storyline we've seen time and time again of, the daughter daughter being rebellious to one of the parents, that's a storyline we've seen time and time again, and I think lends more of itself well to a side plot. So yeah, could have been pushed to the side and not really focused on. And they don't really focus on that one much really either. So it's kind of just eh. Could have been there, could have been scrapped. But definitely not the focus, I think. Now this one, these other storylines that I'm going to mention are kind of don't tie in together again. The storyline I mentioned earlier between Hilary Swank and then her father, and then Hilary Swank and her job of taking care of the ball, doesn't lend itself to anything because we don't need her to have a whole dilemma with the ball. We don't need that. That didn't need to be a storyline. But there is a storyline that is a little bit more down to earth and more, I think, a little bit identifiable, and that's her relationship with her father, which is really not all that explored too much within this film, and it's kind of shoehorned in at the end. And I feel so sorry for Robert De Niro. Robert, why? I know you have to work, man, but why this movie? But basically, Hilary Swank's father is Robert De Niro, and their relationship is not all that powerful. But it definitely could, I think, have worked as another storyline, somehow tying together with the Michelle Pfeiffer and Zac Efron story, and tying in with the Jessica Parker and maybe daughter story or something like that. Maybe Sarah Jessica Parker could be a sister of Hilary Swank, and they have their father, Robert De Niro, who's passing away, and then the daughter, is being rebellious, and you could have tied those things in, and then you could have incorporated all of these different kinds of, love scenarios. You have the love of the daughters to the dad, you have the love between the mother and the daughter, and then you have the love between the two lovers. And heck, maybe Michelle Pfeiffer could have been another sister, or a younger woman could have been, a younger sister, or another, another granddaughter or something. You could have tied in something in there that would have made this plot stick. And again, like I mentioned before, those those things could have, I think, ultimately worked. Maybe if they tied, if the father sort of dies within the beginning or something, and it's around maybe the new year, and usually when a relative passes away around a holiday, it usually doesn't, it doesn't, the holiday, I think, never ends up feeling right. Sometimes for those who've had that experience. So I think had they had that in there, um, and maybe incorporated some flashbacks of Robert De Niro's character, and him bonding with the sisters, and then we have one sister who falls in love, one sister who's rekindling the bond between her daughter, and then one sister who's, I guess, the career girl. I don't know, Hilary Swank. That could have tied itself in a little bit well, because we're narrowing it down here. We're getting to the meat and the juice here. And I think it ultimately would have worked, had they incorporated some connection maybe to the holiday, but then make it sort of celebratory and of hope and, of enough remembrance maybe too for their father and whatnot. So yeah, I think had they maybe focused in more on those lines, because those lines I think are a lot more identifiable. They're a lot more down to earth. They make sense. They're not so commercialized. It's not, New Year's Eve is not the major focus of the film, but it is still within the storyline. So yeah, I think had they made those changes, we would, I think, have seen a lot stronger product. Oh, and I should mention the other storyline involving the pregnancy thing. Yes, there's a pregnancy thing here. There's two pregnant women who want to get their babies out the closest around New Year's, because apparently there's a money reward for it. And the lengths they go to do this is insane and bizarre and dumb. Which again, I think could have been tied a little bit better. You maybe could have had, maybe Hilary Swank is pregnant around New Year's or something. And maybe that she didn't even know that there was like a thing that involves that you get money, on New Year's if you give birth. And then when her and her husband go to the hospital and they give birth, they say, hey, oh, we'll give you some money because, you're the ones who came around this time. And they didn't even know it, that wasn't even really a part of the plot line, but they try to make it part of the plot line, and the selfishness and the greediness that are out of these parents to be is just unbelievable. It's just mind-boggling, and this was probably the storyline that made me cringe. So, had they just made it completely innocent and void of the motivation of greed, then I think we would have been fine. But man, is it just, it's just crazy. Oh, it's just insane. So yeah, those were really all the storylines, and basically what I described is kind of how I would narrow things down. I think, again, had they made it a major theme about different kinds of love, different kinds of scenarios sort of tying in together, and making it about less characters and more about their character relationships and bonds, then I think we would have ultimately had a better product. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this film in a nutshell. It's just one of those crazy rom-coms that came out that tried to cash in on this whole holiday craze, and I think it ultimately failed, both from an audience perspective as well as a critic perspective. But I think had they remained true to what New Year's really brings for people, and made the stories a lot more down to earth, less commercialized, and a whole lot less superficial, we would have definitely had a better product. And had they inserted things that sort of revolved around what they initially had, but made it a lot more meatier and with a lot more depth, then we, I think, could have definitely had a stronger final outcome. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say. But again, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.